Hello everyone. I am recording this video because I am away. I also don't have a substitute probably. But I do try to make sure that you guys have a substitute. But unfortunately in this situation, the college wasn't able to. So I'm either sick or some emergency happened or an appointment. But just wanted to do this for you guys in advance so that you are prepared for our lecture. So today we're going to do the emotional and language development in middle childhood. I'm going to start this lecture. Okay, so we have four learning objectives, and they're really important in terms of behavior management. And so we'll first talk about language development and then the emotional development, pro-social and antisocial behaviors. Learned helplessness is the final one. And yeah, excuse me. So first and foremost, language development. We do have a little riddle as a class if we were there. I can be open or closed or big or small. I can reveal the truth or hide it. I am almost always welcome and can spring up unannounced. Everyone has one, but not everyone shares. Laughter comes after me. What am I? Um, if we were in the class right now, it is definitely, I'm sure you all are very smart, and so you probably know the answer, but the answer is a smile. So cute, this little girl. But yeah, so our class is all about the emotional and language development. So we're going to talk about that. So we kind of touch base on the language development when we talked about the developmental milestones, but we're going to go more in depth today. So the first and foremost is language development from 6 to 11 years old. So as we all know, in during this time, kids, their minds are getting more complex and they are becoming more aware and they're learning so much, absorbing in everything around them. And yeah, so the growth of their brain, it helps them understand and then you use the nuances and subtleties of language, meaning like metaphors, things like that, and like tones and what people actually mean when they say things. They tend to be more aware of that now and understand it. So they gradually advance from understanding simple sentences to be able to interpret like complicated content, like if someone uh shows them a paragraph or talks in a very long way. And then yeah, they also advance in their writing from writing a few words at a time to having more complex stories and reports. They are still very limited at this age where they only think of the present. They're very literal in their thinking, right, in the beginning, and then they start to be more abstract. But they're in terms of time, their thinking skills are like here and now, like more like, oh, what am I gonna do now or tomorrow? Like in that sense, like just a very close proximity. They don't really think about the future just yet. I know adults around them would ask them, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they would have like random answers. I remember one little girl, she loves love. um and when we like another coworker of mine asked her, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said that, oh, I want to be in love, which is so cute. But that's just how like they kind of think about like here and now. So around school age children, they can understand more than they can express. So they do not comprehend a lot of what adults discuss with them most of the time at around this age, like 6 to 11. But they can kind of absorb it instead of like saying it in a way. So you may need to ask them to repeat back what you said so that it actually like they can, oh, okay, I get it, like to make more sense with it. So when you're a big hint for you guys when you're giving them instructions, like for example, oh, can you please get dressed? Because we're gonna go outside. And then I telling them that like, oh, please wear your jacket, put on your shoes, your outside shoes, um, and your toque if it's cold, and then we'll be ready. And then they'll be like looking at you like this. And they're like, well, what? And then just ask them like, okay, what did you guys hear? And then yeah. Okay. So around 9 years old, like before they turn 9, they're very literal, like we talked about, right? They're very confused to statements like, oh, she's as cool as a cucumber. If they hear that, they would think that like, oh, are they cold? Or they look like a cucumber? Is that what they mean? Um, they'll think that way. But as an adult, we kind of understand that, oh, when someone says, oh, she's as cool as a cucumber, that means that person is just cool, right? Like they're pretty awesome, like that. Around age 10, that's when they start to develop that words have multiple meaning, especially the English language. There's a lot of multiple meaning in like one word. So they tend to understand that better now. So for example, when they hear things like a metaphor, so when they hear like, oh, Leela is a real firecracker. When you hear firecracker and it's described as a personality, you know as an adult that like, oh, they're like very lively person, they have big energy, type person. So but with kids under 10, they'll be like, what? She's not a firecracker, she doesn't explode, she doesn't have like a like a fuse, right? So yeah. So here's a funny one. Funny literal comic that we have. So this alien is like, this is scalding. I want it. It appears you poured the hot liquid on some all old leaves. That's what exactly I did. Hot leaf liquid. Sucrose crystals? Several thousands, please. They're very literal, this alien comic here. Kind of like kids. Now, storytelling and language development has a big relationship together, as we've already kind of discussed. They get better at telling stories when they get older as well. The child stories are probably longer and more detailed now when they get older. And they probably make sense too, compared to like a 4-year-old. They'll like tell you like random jumbles of things, and you're just like, oh, okay, yeah, that's awesome. But then compared to like a 7-year-old, excuse me, their stories make more sense. Sometimes their stories are made up because they're still kind of in that magical thinking, right? They might have a theme as well, like a character or a plot. For example, oh, the boat sank, so everybody had to swim to the beach. Like that makes sense, right? But some kids, like younger kids, would be like, oh, the boat sank, and then a unicorn like saved them, and they all flew to the unicorn island, and they lived happily ever after. Something like that, right? Like younger kids would say that, but older kids would make more sense and a little bit more realistic. As the kids keep learning and practicing their language, their storytelling will definitely improve. It'll be easier to work out who's the child, who's the child talking about when they're telling a story, and then they all fit together as well. So in these years, the child might use different linking words like, oh, because, then, now, when, before, while, and although. So these are linking words. I remember one of the kids, he always says, kibas, kibas, because that's his way of saying because he's still kind of like switching the letters. But he always says that, like, oh, when you ask them, oh, like, well, what happened here? Well, kibas, like, I had to go pee, like, things like that, and I messed up, and then I know someone was in the bathroom and I had to pee in my pants, like that. Like, it's so cute, but it just shows that their language development is growing as well when they're able to explain that way. So they have use of different sentence types as well, like present, to present the same information. They can correctly pronounce he, she, and they when they're telling a story. What you can notice though, I think it's a cultural thing. Kids who are like they're new from Canada, and the English language is their second language. They might confuse he and she a lot. So they might call you he even if you're a she, or they might call you she if you're a he. So just, there's nothing, right? Keep that in mind. Another thing is that they understand the difference between fact and theory, like what that is, the difference between what happened and why do you think. So when you ask those things, they'll have a better understanding and a better explanation. I'm gonna put the link of this video in our Moodle. So we're gonna move forward from here. So this is Jack. He's just a speech and language therapist. This video is about like a minute long. Pretty good to see. Our next topic is vocabulary. So a child in middle childhood is also able to think of objects in less literal ways, right? Like literal meaning like things you can touch. Now they can talk about like love, freedom, justice. So if, for example, if asked for the first word that comes to mind when one hears the word pizza, a preschooler will likely say eat, or some words that describe pizza like, oh, ham, pepperoni, cheese, like that. But someone who's older, they're most likely to like give categories. Like, for example, when they hear pizza, they'll say food or carbohydrate, which is like a little bit more advanced in thinking when they say carbohydrate, right? And a big one for vocabulary is jokes and humor. So kids who are younger, they're really funny, but sometimes they don't know why they're funny. But older kids can be intentional, like they can become funny because they want to be funny. They want to make people laugh, right? So this sophistication of vocabulary is very, very advanced in thinking, actually. So especially kids who are very witty. Witty means they can think right away and like make jokes like super fast. This actually shows an advance in intelligence. Jokes and humor is actually indicator of strong intelligence. So which is really cool. So they may use jokes that involve some play on words, like knock knock jokes, jokes with punchlines. Preschoolers do not understand play on words and they rely on telling jokes that are very literal, or like things like, oh, a man fell down in the mud. Isn't that funny? So yeah, younger kids, they'll um make fun of like physical comedy. So if someone like falls over, someone gets hit, and they're all like start laughing, like from babies to like preschoolers. But with older kids, like middle childhood, they will laugh at like really witty, funny things. Like if someone is like I can't really think of a joke right now, but yeah, like really advanced jokes, like they'll get it, right? So why is language development important? Kind of know this, but a big one is that it improves their self-esteem. There's a lot of studies that show that kids who are able to communicate earlier, like using their words and express themselves earlier, actually shows a lot of high self-esteem. So when someone has a well-developed language skill, they can improve self-esteem. And when children find that they can use their language skills effectively, they may have more motivation to interact with others. So it can also help them develop confidence in their schoolwork and making friends. So the more they're able to express, the more sociable they are as well, right? So if a child can communicate with their peers, they're likely to have a higher self-esteem because they can make friends easily, and they make those jokes, right? Like very complex jokes, and humor and being able to express themselves gives them more success in like when they become adults, like getting jobs. Like they're a lot easier to have interviews as well, things like that, right? Another reason why it's important is that it enhances literacy. What this means is that it's very critical to have literacy skills, especially for a child, in understanding books and like assignments and like the instructions and assignments. So for example, for you guys, when I give you guys assignments, I try to make it very clear and uh yeah, very clear and short and direct instructions. Um and sometimes for kids' assignment, it's not like that. It's very vague, and then they have to figure things out. So it's really important for them to understand books and the instructions in their assignments, to like challenge them. So it's also very vital for kids to understand their caregiver's instructions and topic. If you, the adult, is someone who talks a lot, it's and then like rambles on and you don't make sense and you know it happens, right? Especially if you're excited. I get like that. I totally get it. But yeah, it is kids who have a delayed language will have a hard time processing the caregiver's instructions. So an example we have here is that a child can only understand how to perform basic mathematical problems. It can if they can identify and follow directions. So it actually starts from following your directions as the adult, like little things like, okay, let's go wash your hands. It can also, it's connected to learning basic math because like, like for them to be able to follow through those simple directions with math, because it's like step by step things, they need to follow each step. So knowing how to help kids with language issues can improve their learning abilities and it boosts their academic performances as well. So if you do notice that a child, is less likely talking, they might have selective mutism, um, it's really good to encourage them to talk and also read to them. They don't have to talk all the time, but if you expose them to a lot of language, they are still absorbing that, which is really good. So children who have more developed language skills typically have less risks of any cognitive impairment and may find it easier to understand basic concepts, and it helps them in school. And with school they have more confidence, and then in terms of reading and writing, and yeah, which is really good. It enhances literacy overall. The next one is it aids self-expression. We kind of like repeatedly talk about this. Self-expression is a big thing because it allows them to communicate with everyone around them, with their siblings, their parents, and adults, like what they're feeling, and expresses their needs, like or things that they want and don't want, right? Outside the home, kids benefit from language skills to express themselves, and while playing with friends as well, participating in class, and interacting with their teachers at school. That's a big one. So things like if they need help on something, for them to be able to ask for help, it's a form of self-expression, and this allows them to get the support that they need. And we talked about this with the industry and inferiority, how kids who get support from adults become more successful, right? But kids who don't, like they end up feeling inferior, and sometimes the adults can't catch that they need support, right? So for the kids to be able to express that they need help is that bridge that connects them into becoming more successful. So it's really important to help them and encourage them to talk so that they can express themselves. So having strong communication skills for their age can help children build strong relationships with their peers as well. And when kids can express themselves through language, their social interactions and everyday life becomes much easier. Which this brings us to the fourth reason, which is promote social interaction. So when they're able to talk and communicate, they make good friends, right? They're able to create friends easily, family members, they have good relationship. And like I told you before, friendship is the number one priority of kids. Like it's not even school. So it's really important to encourage that. So a well-developed language can improve a child's ability to engage in their social interaction so that their social and interpersonal skills will develop. And then they learn how to use the language very effectively. They learn faster when they're able to communicate a lot easier too. So it's super essential to pay attention on how well children develop language so that they can function effectively, especially in a social setting. So that's one of you guys can like part of the job is to encourage that, right? Like social skills. Here are fun literacy activities with kids that you guys can do. Word games. Word games expand literacy, expand language, like any word games, like Scrabble is a big one, Pictionary. There's telestrations as well, which is super fun. Those are like board games. Or you can make jokes. I remember for one of the daycares that I worked at, every day we have a joke for the day, and then every morning and afternoon, um, like because we have like a kids batch in the morning and kids batch in the afternoon, we would like uh talk about like first thing we do like, okay, what's the joke for the day? Usually we have like one or two or three. Riddles is actually super, super good as well because it gives the brain to think about words and visuals together. Rhyming, as we know, is super effective. Homonyms is kind of like rhyming, they just sound the same. Storytelling, encouraging them to do like a lot of storytelling is a really good one. So for example, like, oh, what did you do last weekend? Or do you have something to share with us? You know, things like the songs. A lot of you guys are very musical, which is awesome. And yeah, so tongue twisters, these ones are honestly for like 9, 10 years, 11 years old, because it's a bit of a complicated one, and so younger kids don't really get it just yet, and they might like get twisted with their essentially like with the way that they express things. But if you challenge the kids and they like it, like yeah, go for it. Here is a little fun um joke that we have is, what do you call an alligator in a vest? An investigator. I love this one. Our next one is emotional development. So emotional development is something that we need to uh pay attention to with the kids, right? So as they get older, their experiences allows them to develop more realistic understanding of themselves, of their environments, and they're kind of getting to know their strengths and weaknesses. Excuse me. So understanding their strengths and weaknesses, they're developing something called self-concept. So it's influenced by messages like they receive from their peers, from their family, and other adults in their lives, right? So if an adult tells them that, like, oh my gosh, you're such a brave little girl. I'm super, super proud of you. You're so courageous for, standing up for your friends. Like, that's super courageous. Like, they will internalize that and they'll think that, yeah, I'm a brave girl. And when they become adult, that's the voice that they'll hear. So continuum of development. So continuum development, this identifies several root emotional skills that are emerging in middle childhood. So during these years, they are kind of solidifying. So like they're making like the development of their self-concept, identity, and self-esteem is like in the development right now. And like we talked about how at 9 years of age, there's a huge drop of self-esteem. But because of that, like uh it goes into their self-concept as well. So because they start comparing themselves to others and they become more aware of stereotypes, it can impact their self-concept, which is like their identity as well. So they are able to recognize and the emergence of complex emotions like gratitude. So being able to be thankful about their families, they're thankful about their day, friends, things like that. We actually do a lot of like gratitude circles in daycare and like schools nowadays, which is really nice. So I highly encourage you guys, if your childcare facility doesn't do this, like let them like tell them like, hey, can we have a gratitude circle? Jealousy is a big one because they start comparing themselves. So this is actually a new emotion for them. So it's really important for you guys to teach them that jealousy is like a normal feeling. It's kind of ugly, yes, but if you use jealousy as a motivation to improve yourself, it's a good thing, like, the positive outcome. But if you use jealousy to hurt others, then that's a bad thing. And, so jealousy and gratitude, this is why gratitude should be practiced. It's like a muscle, right? The more you use it, the more better it is. The more they feel more gratitude about what they have, the less likely it'll impact their self-esteem, because less likely jealousy increases. And then, yeah. And anxiety. Kids who have anxiety like early on will only just get kind of worse, essentially. Um, but it's, they just need reassurance. They just need to continually feel safe. And, being around trusted adults like really help with that. More of it. So there's a lot of strategies managing emotions, like self-talk that we do, like positive self-talk, right? We talked about this, how go look at yourself in the mirror and say, I love myself. I am beautiful. I am super happy that I was born, things like that. Empathy, right? This is the time that it is starting to develop and starting to be understood. So it's really great to develop that. Perspective taking, we talked about this the other day about how the theory of mind will develop that perspective taking. So they often take great pride in their work and their newfound abilities to preserve and solve problems. So take use of that. So tell the kids, hey, I'm proud of you. I'm proud that you were able to go to the bathroom by yourself without any support. I am proud of you for coloring in the lines. I am super proud of you for listening and sitting down the whole time during reading time, things like that. So it's super great to be uplifting and encouraging for that to them, because it increases their self-esteem and self-concept too. Now, with the later end of middle childhood, so around 9 to 12, their skills, like metacognitive skills, so their awareness, it increases, so improves. And then they are able to anticipate the future better, and it allows them to be better prepared for managing their emotions. So for example, if there is a big test coming up, because like around 9 or 12, that's like grade 7 to grade 8, like bigger tests or transition to high school, it's kind of scary, right? So anxiety happens. So kids from elementary to high school, it's a big transition. And some kids don't really show that it's a scary thing, but it's actually quite scary. So for them to anticipate that, oh, okay, I'm going to high school soon, it's a little scary, but I am preparing my mental self, like, yeah, I'm preparing for it mentally so that my emotions don't get the better of me. And yeah, it's normal to feel scared. It's okay because, a lot of things is unknown. So you could, especially if you're working with kids who's grade 7 and they're transitioning to high school, telling them what's high school like in a positive way and like realistic way as well will definitely help them. Like, don't scare them, right? Like, oh, high schools, there's like bullies and teenagers are scary. No, they're not. They're not scary. Teenagers are kids. They're still kids. And yeah, they act a little bit different, but that's okay. That just means that, they're just growing up, right? But because of hormonal stuff, right? Genetics, stuff like that, they can really struggle, like 9 to 11 years old, to manage their emotions. So sometimes it's like really big, like outbursts or like depression, right? Or like they get really overwhelmed so easily. And like there's a lot of frustrations on the demands of the situation, because the reason why that is, and that's why the reason why one reason that teenagers are a little bit cranky and like depressed is because the huge drop of self-esteem, right? Like jealousy, things like that. And then wanting to be more independent, but they're still a kid. So there's a huge like struggle between the two, and there's no balance because they want to be more independent because they can, which is, but they get limited by their parents sometimes, and sometimes it's too much. So they end up like wanting to like get out of that, and then there's a lot of like, power struggle. So the reason why they want to be more independent, it's not because of peers, it's actually because of their demands and how their brain works. Their brain is like, yeah, I can learn this, I can do this. Like the demands of my situation is telling me that, yeah, I can be more independent, but I understand I'm still kind of like a kid. But like it's a, yeah, it's a big confusing time for teenagers for sure. And that brings us to pro-social and antisocial behaviors. So antisocial behavior, this is actually not like what you see in movies, like, oh, if a kid is like just sitting on a corner and they don't want to play with other kids. That's not antisocial behavior, actually. Antisocial behavior means is that they have an intention to harm or disadvantage another individual. So things like harming them or injuring others, damaging property, like their intention is to punch a hole on the wall, right? Or ruin the toy, right? Or the defy generally accepted rules or authority figures, or they break the laws. So for those who did the assignment for conduct behaviors or oppositional um ODD, oppositional something something disorder. But yeah, those two are antisocial behavior based disorders, and a lot of their behaviors are of intentional harm. Now, the opposite of antisocial behavior is pro-social. I know some of you, or most of you, probably have never heard of pro-social behavior, because I'm sure you've heard antisocial in like TV or something like that. But the opposite of it actually is pro-social behavior. So it's the voluntary behavior to have intentionality in helping others and be more beneficial with others. So someone who's like a team player, for example, someone who's nurturing, who is positive, and they can adjust in a social setting really easily. All of that is pro-social. So pro-social conduct is defined as someone who's empathetic as well, or have compassionate behavior. So someone who's kind to others, kind to animals, kind to themselves, right? Um, yeah. So sharing, like these are the behaviors that they would do. Friendliness, helpfulness to other kids or to you as an adult. They're super welcoming. They're always happy when they see other people. All of that is pro-social. So these two are going to be on the quiz for sure. Now, this is a little bit of a review. This is Albert Bandura's social learning theory about imitation. We've kind of talked about this before, but we're going to go more in detail today. So pro-social and antisocial behavior can be learned by imitating others. So this is Albert Bandura's theory. Pro-social and antisocial actually is being taught either from seeing adults in their lives or, following the rules, stuff like that. So studies have shown that exposure to media that's all about cooperation and helpfulness results to reenactment of behaviors of those behaviors. So it's actually opposite of what you guys have learned probably in like the mainstream or like the TV or something like that, how kids who watch violent movies or play violent video games, they'll become like violent, right? That's actually the opposite. So studies have seen that kids who've seen more sharing, more friendliness, they will follow that more than the violent part. The violent part, they'll be like, oh, whatever, it's just a game. But if they see that, like, oh, this is how you make friends. Honestly, I'm gonna be very honest with you guys. I used to watch anime when I was like younger and even now, and all parts of the friendship, like how to make friends, how to keep friends, what does friends look like? I learned all about that in anime, and it's a show, right? And there's some violent parts in it, but I don't remember them. I just remember the how to make friends part, which is definitely helpful with how I grew up. So as well as promoting pro-social behavior through explaining from you guys, the adults, and like what is the appropriate behavior that they need to do is super essential. So saying things like, hey, good job for sitting down quietly and looking like you're ready to listen, like during our reading time. Like we're just about to start and I'm seeing that you're ready, so we're gonna start now. Like that, right? So other things like we use our inside voices when we're playing and talking with friends instead of saying no yelling. So really teaching them like what to do instead of not to do is more beneficial in their learning. Because like if you say like, okay, no yelling, they'll be like, so what do we do then? Like, do we whisper? Do we just like what level of voice do we do? Like, yeah, right? Or like no running. And then some kids will challenge you with that. I remember this, like a 12-year-old, like bunch of 12-year-old boys were like running around the hallway. And I would tell them like, oh, no running, like just um kind of automatic for me. Instead of them not running, they started skipping. And so they started skipping or like pretending they're like horses, like or they're riding a horse throughout the hallway, and then like they're like, oh, I should have said like, oh, we're gonna walk instead of run, like that. It's super important to show them the pro-social behavior. So we're gonna talk more about pro-social behavior. So we're gonna talk about what are pro-social skills, what is altruism, and there are still risks. Antisocial behavior, there are risks, but so does pro-social. So what are pro-social skills? A little class discussion. I wish we were in class, but do you think empathy and sympathy are personality traits? We kind of went over this in class, right? Or are they behaviors or skill that need to be learned? So I hope by now you guys know that they are to be learned. They're um, like I said, a muscle, and we're not born with knowing what empathy and sympathy looks like. We need to learn it like someone needs to show us what that looks like, right? So in childhood development terms, they're considered as social and emotional skills or pro-social skills. So the children need to learn rather than something that they're born, like I said. So they include being caring, comforting, compassion, cooperation, empathy, great gratitude, so being grateful, right? Being helpful, kindness, sharing, sympathy. All these are pro-social skills that they need to be taught. And I'm sure if you guys look into your life, you never knew what empathy was until someone has showed it to you, which is really cool. Now, the next part of pro-social behavior is altruism. So altruism is actually refers to the quality possessed by people whose focus is something other than themselves. So it roots reveals the object of generous tendency. So someone who's very caring, who gives their time, their emotion, their efforts to helping someone else. So being selfless is an example of altruism. So someone altruistic is generous with their time, energy, and even money, all to help their fellow humans, right? So here are examples of altruism, right? Putting others first, anticipating other people's needs, forgiving others, not expecting reciprocity. So what that means is that, let's say you help someone, right? Or you gifted them something, but you don't expect them to gift you like the same value of a thing, or you don't expect them to do the same thing as you do, all of that. So sacrificing time and money to help others, offering support, worrying about how your actions may affect others, being considerate of other people's well-being as well. All of this is part of altruism. So it's all very kind, right? But so all this is great, but the risk of altruism is people pleasing. So when someone doesn't have boundaries, they end up being people pleasers, which means they're sacrificing their time for other people, right? But in knowing that they have things that they need to handle for their own selves, that they need to prioritize. So when someone is a giver, right, they're giving so much, and so it's too much. And it's very, very out of the box. So it's really important to recognize that and teach boundaries. So altruism is the instinct to help others, and can be intrinsically rewarding, like internally rewarding, because it feels good, right? But people pleasing is the dark side of altruism. It's saying yes and doing things out of fear of rejection. So it's actually not because they want to help the person, because they're being kind. It's the fear of rejection, like fear of people not wanting to be their friends anymore, or they won't like them anymore, or they'll think badly about them. It can also rise out of feelings of insecurity. So when someone has low self-esteem, they'll tend to become people pleasers as well. So here are some people-pleasing behaviors, and that can be confused for being nice. So putting other people's needs first, not showing your true feelings to avoid conflict, always agreeing with people and doing what they want, allowing people who haven't changed back in your life, not asserting your boundaries due to the fear of rejection, and offering to do things even when you don't want to, right? So people pleaser is someone who goes out of their way to make other people happy and avoid conflict, usually at the cost of their own time, resources, or happiness, which is quite heartbreaking in a sense. So here's an example of what that looked like. This is a simple example, but so this guy's like, hey, we're thinking of sandwiches for lunch. And this girl's like, I love sandwiches. Let's go. And he's like, great. And she's like happy outside. But then when they're eating sandwiches, she's like thinking, oh, I hate sandwiches. Isn't that so frustrating when you're like, okay, the group wants this, but then you're like, oh, I don't really like that, but I don't want to be a bother. I don't want to be uh if I reject the sandwiches, I don't want them to reject me as a person. Like they probably won't want to be friends with me or talk to me at all, right? So that comes from a place of insecurity, and so it's very, very difficult. So it's important to um help kids to build their confidence so they don't turn out to be people pleasers. Our next one is antisocial behavior. So with antisocial behavior, we have something called aggression. So aggression, and this is such a cute photo right here. But we say that people are aggressive if they are yelling or hitting each other, right? When they cut off the cars in traffic when they're older, right? Even when they smash their fist on the table in frustration, that's aggressive behavior. But other harmful acts like the injuries the sports player received during a rough game, right? Like they bumped their head each other, tackled each other, um, or killing enemies in a war. These are not viewed to be aggressive. It's like less aggressive than when someone's yelling, right? Like kind of interlude. So what they found in studies is that intentional harm is worse than unintentional harm, right? Even when the harms are identical, which we'll talk about more. Actually, no, that's it. Yeah. So how do we promote pro-social behavior, right? Number one, point out the pro-social behavior, their behavior or other people's behavior. There's so many opportunities to catch other kids doing pro-social behaviors out in the world. So kids need feedback all the time to know what's appropriate and what's not. So try to catch them when they act and when they problem solve or being kind to someone else or to an adult. Label that act. So and praise it. So things like, I like how you helped your friend by carrying their backpack and because they're injured, that was really kind of you for helping them, carry their backpack. Another thing is that it was so nice how you held the door for us. That's so kind of you. I like the kind way your friend invited you to join their group. That was really sweet of them. So a little homework for all of you is next time you notice something in your family, in your friends, try pointing it out, the pro-social behaviors of that person around you. So things like, hey, I really like how you are so resourceful and that your resourcefulness like helped out our day, like things like that. Like this. Thank you for holding the door. That was super kind of you. Another way is modeling pro-social behaviors. You as an adult have to show them how to do it. So research show that children show wide range of pro-social behaviors, like helping, sharing, and cooperating in the first year of life. So they do want to be helpful, right? And do all these pro-social behaviors. So for example, handing a toy to you, they're able to do that around 14 months. They learn by watching adults. So they found that when 16-month-old babies observe adults being helpful, the babies are likely to be helpful as well. Over time, pro-social behaviors become more sophisticated and socially necessary as children develop cognitively, socially, and in their language, and then in their motor abilities as well. So when you model pro-social behavior, the best way is that you can ask the child to join in on like a conversation or like a game. You can for problem solving or like sharing, talk with another teacher, right? Within earshot. So that means like they can hear you and about how you're doing, how you're gonna share, how you're gonna be kind to the other teacher, like describe that, right? And then to help children develop feeling words, try labeling your own emotions because you have to model this, right? Like, oh, scary? No, I don't find it scary. I find it thrilling to jump in the deep end of the pool without floaties. Like I find it super exciting like that, right? Or I feel badly. She broke her arm. I wonder how we could help her, right? That shows a lot of pro-social behavior there. Another one is act it out. Things like a puppet show. These are super fun for kids. They love puppet shows, and it's a really great way to develop social and emotional learning. So this is like a visual way, especially for kids who love visual things. Like we talked about learning styles before, right? So someone who's a visual learner, they would love puppet shows and labeling emotions like, oh, Mr. Rabbit is so feeling lonely today. Why do you guys think that? Or like, oh, she feels excited. So they can also help kids practice emotions and communicating, talking to the puppet. And so, with their language skills, they are able to practice that. Yeah. Now, the next one is teaching boundaries to overcome people pleasing. So if you do notice some people pleasing tendencies with the kids, this is a great way to teach them. So to help understand people pleasing and boundaries, or to help understand personal boundaries, compare it to physical boundaries, right? Kids are very literal sometimes, especially to the earlier ages. So it's really important to show them the physical boundaries. So things like the property line around the house. So as you guys see here, there's two houses, right? But then there are borders within the houses. So you can show them that, right? So a border of a house is open enough so that someone can enter that property, but it's solid enough that the neighbor knows not to set like a shed in another person's yard, right? Like not to build a shed right here and then they own it. Like that doesn't make any sense, right? So people would better understand this because it's a physical boundary. This is actually the boundary song, which I love so much. Let me just figure out how to, well, let's try to sing it together. Hopefully you guys can hear it. Actually, I'm gonna send this in our Moodle so that you guys can see it. Here's the boundary songs for the other kids. Now, our last topic for today is learned helplessness. So this one's a big one. So the definition of learned helplessness is when someone has come to believe that they are unable to control or change the situation. So they don't try. Even when opportunities for change become available, they don't try. Nothing I do matters. I always lose kind of mindset. And that is what learned helplessness is. So here is a little picture here where this elephant, right? They're tied to like this wooden thing. They are so strong that they can easily remove that. But because they have learned helplessness, they don't even try. Right? So it says here, remember the elephant that was restrained by a small chain? It can easily break it free, but it doesn't even try. This is what this is what we termed learned helplessness. So yeah. So there's a lot of research on learned helplessness actually. Research on it suggests that if we expose to repeated adverse events meaning like traumatic events or like really, really difficult, challenging events that they don't feel like they won, they feel like a failure all the time. So that inferiority is like very strong. They cannot escape it or avoid it. They will learn to do nothing. So the first instinct is to escape or avoid. Thus, if that's not going to work, they'll just stop. They're going to just stop trying. They simply want to just sit or stand helplessly and suffer the punishment. Yeah. So overcoming learned helplessness, people can push back against it by practicing independence. So allowing the kids be a little bit independent to the point not like you're gonna leave them alone, like you still supervising and you are still there, that they know that you're supporting them and you're playing with them. It cultivates resilience, self-worth, and self-compassion. So allowing some level of independence with children 6 to 11 years, like I told you guys, they still need support from adults, um, especially on tasks, and they need like ongoing supervision, but letting them like do it even though you're like right beside them, that shows like practicing independence there. So engaging activities that restore self-control also can be very, very valuable. So an example of this, have the child to do something you know they can do in a situation where they're likely to be successful. Once finished, offer verbal reinforcement and praise for their work. And this strategy helps build children's self-esteem and show them that they can do things successfully. We have a video here about learned helplessness, so it's important that you watch this as well. And this is a like fun take home activity of love languages. That is our lecture for today. I know it's a little bit faster because don't have class and I'm away and there's no substitute, but I hope that this reporting helps you guys. But I will see you in our next class. And yeah, have a good day.